Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the pre-show, everyone. Here we are once again. It has been a month since the last time we talked. The show's going to get going here in just a little over 13 minutes. Officially, always like to do this as sort of a opportunity to talk about whatever you might have burning deep in your soul that may or may not relate to real estate. I also like to use it as an opportunity to check and make sure we're streaming on all the various places. Looks like we're up on Facebook. Facebook's has changed their policies on videos lately, so things are very weird there. Yeah, there we go. We're up on YouTube. That's very weird. But I don't see anybody in yet. I still find that the vast majority of folks consume this afterwards as a restream kind of thing, which is fine. Are we up on LinkedIn? Looks like we are. Yeah. Looks like we are. But I don't see anybody in yet. So there we are. That's good. But anyway, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I'd love for you, for the questions that you have relating to what we talk about, to come in during the show so that if you have that question, I'll bet there are at least 5 other people who have that same question. So I would love to get a feeling or be able to get those answers to those folks during the show. So it's like a one shot and done for them. We had a great question last time about someone looking for how do you find those off-market properties and stuff. That was a great topic. Feel free to go and look at the restream of that. You can find that on YouTube. Super easy. I think it'll also be up there on X. And that's the other thing we should check here and just see if we are live on X. But as I was saying, Facebook is doing weird stuff with their video. I don't know why they would make it harder for folks to... That shows me live. I don't know why they would make it harder for folks to do that on Facebook. Everything looks like it's good. So we're there. So if anyone's got any questions, feel free. I'm looking at the chat now. You'll also notice that chat will appear right there on your left side of the screen if you have any questions. Let's see. Yeah. All right. We've got about 10 minutes left. One thing that has come up, it's come up for me as a thing that I find a little bit distressing. Oh, one other thing to mention is the podcast is coming back. I've finished the notes for a podcast. I've set aside the time to do it, and it will get posted on Tuesday morning. So for those of you who kind of gave up on the podcast because it's been almost 2 years since the last episode, maybe you've turned off your subscription, head on back over to iTunes or for Apple Podcasts or whatever. There are dozens of different venues that the podcast has been available. So feel free to go over and check that out because it's going to start back up and it will be at least weekly. That is the commitment I will make. I will go back to doing it at least weekly. I'm not going to do it daily or Monday through Friday like I did for 2 years. I think I did it daily because right now I just don't have the bandwidth to do it. And I think I mentioned this a little bit last month, but so much of once you get a podcast that enjoys some level of success, and I think mine was sort of I don't think ever on iTunes it was a top 10. Maybe I think I was in the top 10 in iTunes a few times, but in sort of national rankings and people doing stories about it, my podcast was kind of coming up in the top 10 a lot of the time. for which I am greatly thankful to everyone who spent their valuable time listening to me babble on about real estate, because Lord knows not everyone is as interested in that subject as I am. But it turned into something where I was getting so much feedback on, hey, we can really monetize this and turn it into this or turn it into that. And, you really shouldn't talk about this stuff. You really shouldn't be critical of the industry. Or I even had someone criticize me for making comments about the Association of Realtors. And so I found myself not subconsciously, kind of consciously monitoring what I was saying. And I don't want to do that anymore. When I originally started the podcast, it was very raw, and I liked that. So I'm going to kind of go back to that, which I'm sure friends to the show, Scott in Sacramento, will probably be happy to hear. So we're just going to come back. I'm going to keep it just as open and frank and honest as possible. And it was never not honest, but it would frequently, things just wouldn't get talked about because the rule was, you shouldn't talk about this or that. And I'm done with that. So it's coming back. I'm going to do it in the way that pleases me the most, and that is how it will continue to go. If it ever simply becomes a chore to do, then obviously I shouldn't do it, right? We're just about 7 minutes away from kicking off the show for real, and they've moved the numbers again in terms of who's looking at it from where. Let's see. Nope. I'm surprised there's not a... Okay. I'm surprised there's not a... Well, you guys can't see what I'm seeing, right? So there we go. Now it's showing the number. I use a thing called Restream to send it to YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and X all simultaneously, just because that's easier. So it'll frequently give me feedback on who's watching. Right now, it was we don't have anybody yet in the room. Totally normal. I don't really advertise the pre-show that much. I focus on just the time we start at 10 a.m. But last time we had quite a few folks come in during the pre-show, which kind of surprised me. To be honest, I did a lot more promotion of the show last time, days leading up to it. So clearly there's that. But in any event, the whole point of what I was getting to was I've had a lot of interactions with some folks over the last month that are just... and it's one of the things that's going to fuel the podcast, I'm sure, for the next year, because it's such a relatively new thing. And it's not relatively new to me, as a lot of you know. I'm kind of I tend to be a few steps ahead of overall other agents in terms of technology integrated into what I do, simply because I've always been involved in technology my whole life. So I tend to embrace new shiny things to see what they'll do for me. And while AI is a net positive for real estate agents in terms of engagement and whatnot, man, is it a negative for buyers and sellers and investors out there. And I did this before. I think I did a podcast on this over 2 years ago, where now more than ever, you need to interview your real estate agents and not let their promotional material or even their emails to you be any kind of an indicator to you on whether or not you work with them. You need to get them in front of you. You need to ask them tough questions, because what I'm finding is that AI is taking over all their stuff. I get pinged all the time. I get pinged by people who want me to pitch their service on my podcast. I get people who want to sell me their service for real estate engagement with potential clients. And it completely creates a false or potentially false impression of who the person is that you're thinking about working with. So my suggestion to you is, as it always has been, interview at least 4 agents, and don't interview them. I guess you could do it by Zoom or Skype or whatever your favorite video software is, but I still think in person is important. Because I think you have the highest potential to get the greatest vibe, and I even hate, I'm so much a numbers guy, I hate to say the word vibe, but your instincts, right? That part of your brain that your ancient ancestors used to know it's time to leave the fire and go into the cave, and then everyone else who stayed at the fire got eaten by the saber-toothed tigers. That part of your brain engages when you're talking to someone face to face on whether or not, I need to stay away from this person. Because here's the number of crazy things that I'm being pitched. Everything from all of the material that goes out, all the engagement that happens with people being AI generated, in addition to videos that you would post that are supposedly of you, aren't you. You submit 20 pictures of your headshot from different angles, and then it generates AI videos of you doing this, right? So what I'm saying is this right now could be AI if I wanted it to be. So the in-person thing I think is super important. And here's the thing: some of the most quote unquote successful agents are the ones doing this. And by successful, I mean they make the most money, right? And that's another problem with real estate agents is they get to define what success is. So when they tell you they're a top, and boy, this was one of my first soapboxes. This is going all the way back to 2007. I think the very first podcast I ever did in January of 2007 was on this subject, is the whole top 1% lie. It is absolutely a lie. Every number that they base that on is numbers that have nothing to do with how good of a job they do for buyers, sellers, and investors. It's all about how many homes did I sell last year? How much money did I make last year? What was my take home? And they measure it in all these various dimensions so that as many people as possible can claim to be a 1% agent. And none of that equals good stuff for you. None of it equates directly to this makes me a better agent for you. High volume shouldn't be something you're terribly worried about as a buyer, seller, or investor when you're working with an agent. It should be, for the deals you did do, how did you perform? Did you tend to get your sellers more money than the other guy? Did your home sell faster than the other guy? For buyers, did you tend to be able to negotiate more of a decrease in the purchase price than on average, right? So if the average home sells for 1% over asking price and you've got a buyer's agent who typically gets half a percentage point below asking price, that's data you want to know, right? It's also data that's tracked everywhere, but no agents use it to sell their services to you. Why? Particularly the top, quote unquote, top performing agents, because those numbers for them stink. Top performing agents just do stuff to get the listing, right? So their days on market frequently tends to be longer. The amount that they are going to, the things they suggest you need to do before you can put your home on the market, the dollar amount you need to pay up front just to get ready to sell the place tends to be higher. The amount they're willing to overlist your house tends to be higher. The amount of times they have to take price reductions tends to be higher. So you need to separate the reality from the pitch. And AI is making that 10 times worse. I am blown away by the things I get that get sent to me that people approach me with that say, hey, we can do all of this. We can automate all of your stuff and even nurture people until they're ready to list and then hand them off to you. So it's creepy. Maybe I'm just an old fogey and I need to embrace that, but it's not a thing. I think it does not do good things for buyers and sellers. And here we are. Welcome to 10 a.m. on the third Saturday of the month. We all know what that means. It's time for the Coffee and Real Estate Live Chat, and that's why we're here. Now, again, I have broken the rules like I did last time. I do not have coffee in front of me. I already had my coffee this morning. It has been an early Saturday for me, out doing stuff, and now I'm drinking my electrolyte drink. And that's kind of become my jam, I guess. But did have my coffee this morning. It was my own home brew, sort of mocha, healthy mocha, I guess you could call it. Not as tasty as a real mocha, but almost as good. But in any event, my name is Robert Whitelaw. I'm a licensed real estate broker right here in Santa Clara County. Been doing this since 1988, which is a really long time. And every month, I like to get together with all of you to figure out what is happening in our real estate market. Where are we? How did we get here? And where are we going from here? And that's what this is all about. So we usually start it off with the stats. I think that's always a good place to start. It gives you a little bit of a connection to, what does the data tell us? And I like to start it from the top. So that means Santa Clara County, and then we drill down based on size of community. So I go Santa Clara County, San Jose, Morgan Hill, simply because that's my base, that's my home market, that's where I live, and then Gilroy, and then that way you're able to sort of get that huge 10,000 foot view that also drills down to some smaller markets. And of course, even within San Jose, the submarkets are crazy. So let's go ahead and jump into that. And let me just switch us over to the presentation. All right. There's some interesting notes here. I did something I don't usually do on this one as it relates to the data we're seeing for Gilroy, just because it was so substantially skewing the numbers. I didn't feel right just leaving it as is. But let's go ahead and start where we always do, which is total homes on the market. For those of you who are buyers, think of this number as the total number of products on the shelf you had to choose from. You as a buyer, this is a total summary of how many homes were out there for you to take a look at. If you're a seller, think of this as a competition number. How many homes are competing for the eyeballs that you want on your home? Now, in Santa Clara County, the total number of homes on the market in December of 2025 was 1,099 compared to 2024's 858. So that's a 28% increase in overall inventory. That's a substantial number. It's an awful lot. And it's also interesting because we didn't see as much of a drop-off in inventory in the month of December, which is November and December usually see big drops. We did see a drop. We just didn't see as dramatic a drop as usual. Why do we care? Because that suggests that sellers are more in it to win it. They were willing to deal with folks walking through their house during Thanksgiving and Christmas because they really want to get their home sold. Next, San Jose. In 2024, San Jose had 422 homes on the market in December. In 2025, they had 555. That's a 32% increase from the same time the previous year. In Morgan Hill, we saw 44 homes in December of 2024. In December of 2025, that number went up to 71 homes. That was a 61% increase. In Gilroy, not as much of an increase. 53 homes in 2024. In 2025, we saw 56 homes. That's only a 6% jump in the total number of homes on the market. We'll see other numbers that are interesting for Gilroy here coming up, as I mentioned earlier. But it's interesting to me that they, in terms of inventory, they've kind of had the most stable year over year. One way to explain that is that the market slowdowns and things kind of hit Gilroy earlier. So their escalated or elevated inventory levels hit before they hit these other places. So while we see pretty big jumps in these other communities like Santa Clara County in general and San Jose and Morgan Hill, those areas are later arrivals to this, where Gilroy was there earlier. So that's why we don't see, I think, dramatic percentage increases in those numbers. Welcome, whoever just joined. I see we got a number tick up here. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask in the chat. And I'll be happy to try to address those questions for you as we go through. All right, next we're going to talk about new listings. These are homes that were put on the market in December of 2025 versus 2024. And this just shows, psychologically, it shows how many sellers decided they want to put their house on the market. What is going on with the market in terms of seller mentality? And we have a few numbers like that throughout this. But this is also interesting because we saw across-the-board increases in this number. So the number of sellers willing to jump into the marketplace. My anecdotal experience in my conversations with people who've been listing their homes here in my markets is a lot of folks anticipate that next year is going to see price drops in a lot of their areas. Some of those sellers I've talked to, I think, are correct. Others are wrong. Submarkets here can perform very differently. So let's take a look at what these big numbers tell us. So in Santa Clara County, we had a 30% increase in the total number of homes that were listed in the month of December. It was 456 in December of 2024. In December of 2025, that number went up to 592. In San Jose, we had an increase of 23%. In December of 2024, it was 252. In December of 2025, it was 311. Morgan Hill saw a 57% increase, 21 homes in December of 2024 versus 33 homes in December of 2025. In Gilroy, 43% increase, 14 homes in 2024, 20 homes in 2025. and I think what we draw away from that is what I mentioned before, that the level of interest on the part of sellers on putting their homes on the market is fueled by potential concerns about where their local market is going. And perhaps they were someone who was going to retire in 2 years and thinking about selling a year later or 2 years later, and have decided to expedite that because they think in that window of time the market's not going to be as attractive for them as it is now. So, which has been a pretty common conversation I've had with folks out there in the world. Next, let's take a look at homes sold. This is always a juicy number. That and home sales prices, right, are the two big ones that folks want to talk about. Now, as we can see in Santa Clara County, we've had a drop year over year in the number of homes that have sold, 14% down from the previous year. So December of 2024, 847 homes sold. December of 2025, 730 homes sold overall in the county. And for drawing bigger conclusions, that sample size is compelling, right? Usually you want thousands of data points when you're trying to come to any kind of conclusions. You don't tend to get that with these smaller areas. But that's a number you can take home and say, well, in general, the broad strokes of the market are definitely a decrease in the number of homes being sold. In San Jose, we saw a 16% decline. There was 452 homes that sold in December of 2024. In December of 2025, that dropped to 380 homes. Morgan Hill, it's a wash. We sold the same number of homes in Morgan Hill in December of 2024 as we did in December of 2025. Morgan Hill is one of those interesting markets where and I don't, it's one of those markets where things tend to remain a little bit more stable. While prices are going down in a lot of areas, Morgan Hill often sees flat or small increases. So, and I'm not real sure where to define that, but it's something that I've noticed over the years has been a trend in Morgan Hill. Gilroy, we actually saw a decline in this number to the tune of 10%, 31 homes in December of 2024 versus 28 homes in December of 2025. And let's see. So now that we've looked at homes sold, let's think about, did we add or subtract homes to the marketplace? So if we sold 730 in Santa Clara County and we listed 592, well, that means that we sold more than we listed, right? So that would indicate a 138 home decrease, right? San Jose, same thing, 69 homes totally decreased, those are good things that the inventory is getting reduced. Morgan Hill, not so much. We had one home added to the marketplace, and then in Gilroy we had 8 homes added to the marketplace. So just an interesting way to get a gauge. Now, what's interesting is this happening at this time of year, back when we were seeing the main season, right? June, July, August, what we were seeing was fewer homes being sold than were listed. So it was completely the opposite. We were accumulating inventory, and now we're seeing it change here. This indicates, I think, a change that could spell in some of these markets higher prices rather than lower prices, since we're reducing the overall inventory. January is going to be hugely interesting because that's usually when you start to see a big jump in new listings, but we'll see how it plays out. My guess is that we potentially see at least a stable pricing scenario, if not an increasing one in some of these markets. All right, next, let's take a look at months of inventory. So just to sort of run down what months of inventory equals, if we in December locked in the number of homes that sold and locked in the total inventory, how many months would it take to sell off that inventory? That's what this number represents. Nationally, a balanced market is considered 4.5 months of inventory. Anything higher than that is considered a buyer's market. Anything below that is considered a seller's market. We have never come, well, it has been years, like decades, the last downturn, 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, since we've seen months of inventory go into buyer territory. The fact that we are here right now when there's so many concerns suggests that not only are we still in a seller's market, but also that we're going to stay there for a while. Despite crazy increases in interest rates, this number never approached 4.5 months, just to sort of calibrate you. So Santa Clara County saw a 50% increase. It was 1 week In December of 2024, excuse me, 1 month of inventory in December of 2024. In December of 2025, it was 1.5. In San Jose, we saw a 67% increase. It was just under a month in December of 2024, 1.5 months in December of 2025. Morgan Hill up 57%, 1.4 months of inventory in December of 2024. That jumped 2.2 months in December of 2025. And in Gilroy, we saw that number jump from 1.7 months to 2.1 months for a 24% increase. Let's see here. Next, this is homes pending. Now, homes pending means how many sellers accepted an offer in the month of December. We care about this because it's a leading indicator, right? It'll tell us basically in a ballpark fashion, assuming all of these actually close, the number of homes they're going to sell in, say, January, right? And keep in mind, many of these are a month, actually indicate activity that occurred a month earlier, right? When you talk about homes that sold, that means escrow closed. Well, escrow takes typically, unless it's an all-cash deal, 30 to 45 days. So that means right? Or late April, because your escrow is going to take 30 to 45 days. So that means the activity that fed that high sales number is from a month earlier, not from that month. So, and I don't frequently hear people sort of grokking that reality. But anyway, let's talk about pending or contingent. So what this represents is a seller was presented an offer and they accepted it. So the property went pending. The difference between pending and contingent is typically it starts off as contingent, which means there are things that need to be dealt with in order for the deal to go through. So the buyer gets an opportunity to do their inspections, the loan contingency, all these things. And if any of those fail, or if the buyer really doesn't like the results of some inspections, they can back out of the deal. The number one thing killing deals right now, as it has been for a very long time, is financing, where the financing falls through. So there have been times when it was really, really bad and huge numbers of deals were falling through. That's not happening as much now. So this can be a very valuable indicator of what we're going to see in terms of homes sold in the month of January. Okay, Santa Clara County, very unusual, but no change. The total number of offers that were accepted by sellers was 502 in December of 2024, and it's 502 in December of 2025. In San Jose, it's down 11%, 282 in December of 2024, 251 in December of 2025. Morgan Hill up 40%. It was 25 accepted offers in December of 2024 in Morgan Hill and 35 accepted offers in December of 2025. In Gilroy, we saw a 6% decrease, and given the sample size of Gilroy, I'd call this a wash. Okay, next, let's talk about average original list price. And I still get questions about this, so I want to make sure I'm clear on why we even bother. This is a way to calibrate yourself to the expectations of sellers. When a seller listed their home, this is the price they originally I like to know that stuff. Am I looking at a home that originally was listed for $500,000 more than it's currently listed for? Has it been languishing on the market and they've had to make these huge price reductions? That indicates to me I might be able to get a little bit more aggressive with my sales offer, right? So all great things to understand, all great things to know, just so you can approach an offer on the house with as much data as possible. All right. Another 0% change, not really a 0% change, it's 0.00 something. But last year, or excuse me, December of 2024, the average original list price was $1,836,567. In December of 2025, that number was $1,837,249, so only $1,000 difference. And in terms of rounding, that gives us about a 0% change. In San Jose, down 3.1%. Again, this is expectations. So on average, expectations on the part of sellers didn't change in Santa Clara County year over year and reduced or declined for folks in San Jose. 1,472,000 in December of 2024 and December of 2025, 1,426,000. In Morgan Hill, the number was 1,524,000 in December of 2024. In December of 2025, 1,502,000 for a decline of 1.4%. All right, now here's where the weird stuff comes in. You'll notice a weird little ghostly number next to the Gilroy number. Let me explain why that is. So in Gilroy, in December of 2024, the number was 1,154,000. That was expectations. Well, here's the deal. The number we're seeing for December of 2025 is bloated by one listing. I believe there were 17 or 18. How many homes were listed? Gilroy 20. And one of them was $10.1 million, right? So that is statistically deviant. We don't tend to see $10.1 million homes listed in Gilroy. If we remove that $10.1 million property from the analysis, what we're left with is $1,078,000. So in Gilroy, I think if you're trying to calibrate yourself to the reality on the ground, none of you, well, most of you, are not going to be shopping for $10.1 million properties in Gilroy. So if we eliminate that, instead of it being a 41.1% increase, what it actually is a 6.6% decrease, because without that $10.1 million house, the average suddenly drops to $1,078,000, right? So trying to keep it real, trying to keep these numbers useful for you. If I had left the $10+ million property in there, it would have been an amazing chart to talk about, but it wouldn't have really reflected the reality that you're seeing on the ground. So that is the weirdness that I had to engage in. But I wanted to make sure to give you both sets of numbers. You can decide for yourself whether or not the 10.1 should count. But your personal experience in talking with sellers about buying their home is better reflected by a actual decline in expectations in Gilroy rather than seriously bloated expectations reflected by just the numbers without any sort of analysis before you churn them out. All right, next, let's talk about sales price. And of course, this is just a number, a reality number. This is what people paid. This is not what sellers' expectations were, but it also is a good representation of what they sold in comparison to what expectations were. And we're going to do that little comparison here in a second. Now, in Santa Clara County, we saw a 1.5% increase in the average sales price. Last year, it was $1,864,000. This year, it's $1,893,000. San Jose, we saw a 2.6% decline. $1,489,000 last year, $1,451,000 this year. And one thing to sort of keep in the back of your head, I know I go into the weeds sometimes on these numbers, but keep in mind that this is as much a reflection of the properties that are out there that are selling, which is obviously just straight up what these are. But in many cases, it reflects a shift in buyer interest in lower priced properties. Because you'll go and you'll look at the homes that are available and you'll see the full representation of price levels, price points, price brackets, that type of thing. But sometimes it's not there were fewer homes at the higher price point available and more homes at the lower price point. It's that simply buyer interest shifted for a variety of reasons, whether it's because interest rates were high, I wanted to buy something lower price to compensate, to offset that increased expense, etc. So just sort of to keep in the back of your head, but it still doesn't materially change these facts, but just something to understand and interpret in here. All right, anyway, as I said, 2.6% decline in San Jose. Morgan Hill saw a 10.4% decline. So 1,426,000 in December of 2024. In December of 2025, 1,277,000 was the average. In Gilroy, we saw a 2.8% decline, 1,079,000 in December of 2024. In December of 2025, we saw 1,049,000. Now, as we look at this, let's think about how much off of expectations were this. minus the 10 million, but about a half a million off. I mean, that's crazy, right? So they're really off by about 50,000 in Gilroy if we remove that $10.1 million house. So overall, the county in general is seeing sellers getting more than had original expectations, as is San Jose, while Morgan Hill and Gilroy are not. Let's see. Next, let's take a look at percent over under asking price. Now, this one, I like this number because it gives us some insights into the psychology of the buyers. How much over asking price were buyers willing to go once they bought this home? And this represents a comparison between what the home sold for versus what it was listed for at the time the offer was made. This is not compared to original list price. This is so if a home was listed for $1 million and over the course of 3 months the price had been reduced to $750,000, this ratio is calculated based on that $750,000 amount, not the $1 million original list price that sellers were hoping for. So from that perspective, it's an analysis of what buyers' mindsets were. They were asking $750,000, so I offered this much over, right? And you can see across the board, the amount of overpayment has declined since 2024. In December of 2024, that was 103.4%, meaning buyers were paying 3.4% over asking price to purchase their homes on average. In December of 2025, that number dropped to 102% or 2% over asking price for a 1.4% net delta between those two numbers. In San Jose, it was a 1.6% net delta, where in December of 2024, we saw 103.4 or 3.4% over asking price. And in December of 2025, we saw 101.8, so 1.8 over asking price. In Morgan Hill, 100.4% in December of 2024. In December of 2025, 98.6%, so below asking price with a net overall change over the year of 1.8%. Gilroy actually went up 97.8% in December of 2024. In December of 2025, that number went up to 99.2 for a net change of 1.4, but still reflects the reality of having to take below asking price for your property. I'm actually kind of surprised that we didn't see San Jose also dip below 100%. There are definitely areas, because San Jose is gigantic, right? So there's so many submarkets, some of them so desirable that they're getting way above 1.8 of asking price, 1.8 above asking price. So, but things had gotten tight enough that I had thought we might actually get below 100%, but obviously we haven't seen that here. But still trying to see where it's going to go. As we look at the month-over-month numbers, you'll see what the trend is, and we can see if we can figure out where these numbers will go from there. Next, let's take a look at days on market. I don't think these will be too surprising. These are pretty straightforward. Again, if you have any questions about any of these numbers, feel free to ask in the chat. Regardless of what platform you're on, I should see them, and I will be happy to answer them right here during the live chat. All right, so Santa Clara County days on market up 7%, 30 days in December of 2024, 32 days in December of 2025. San Jose days on market up 19%. It was 27 days in December of 2024 and 32 days in December of 2025. Morgan Hill actually down 7%. 42 days in December of 2024 and 39 days in December of 2025, with Gilroy coming in at negative 34. This is a bit of a shocker. This hasn't been the trend in Gilroy, but it was 50 days in December of 2024 and 33 days in December of 2025. Now, one thing to keep in mind, and this isn't playing a part right now in these numbers, but whenever you see numbers above 18, 19, 20 days, those are real organic numbers, meaning it really is taking that long to get those homes sold. Now, why do I mention that? Because typically what agents will do is when they list a home, they'll say, we will not accept offers till a certain date and time. And that's usually 10 to 15 days after the original list day. So I know that's what I do. I like to have a couple of weekends because right now, one of the best ways for clients to get into homes is open houses. A lot of real estate agents poo-poo open houses, but I'll tell you, the question that often gets asked is, well, how many times have you sold a home in an open house? Well, in an open house, I think in the last 10 years, April, May, June of 2025 is the highest. Um, and there's a pretty typical thing. I mean, this is, while the amplitude is more, right? The height of the graph is more. In terms of shape, what's interesting here is in September of 2024, it actually surpassed the inventory levels of the previous month. Whereas here, we got that bump in September, but we didn't see it surpass the overall inventory numbers. Then we have a nice, big, steady decline right up to December of 2025. All typical, classic shape. So there's nothing there that tells us anything weird is going on in terms of trends. It's just the magnitude of those trends that we're interested in. Usually in December, it bottoms out. Say we got bottoming out here in December of 2023, bottoming out in December of 2024. So we can assume or project. The crystal ball comes out. We can project it from here, it goes up. Historically, that is true. In fact, I would bet money that in January we'll see a U-turn on this and the numbers will go up. Because it's happened every January for quite a few years. But notice 2023 here, 2024 a little higher, 2025 a little higher still. So generally, the trends are the same, but the amount of properties we're talking about is increasing, right? So the number of inventory that's getting, and boy, I wish I had some Kleenex in here. My nose is crazy itchy here. Wow. All right, sorry. So what can we expect from new listings? Is you can see also we tend to see that crater in December. What's also interesting to note is the distance between total active listings and new listings. See how there's the gap widens each year? This is concerning because it tends to suggest that we're going to see an accumulation of inventory that we're not seeing now, remember, because we actually sold more homes than we listed. But we're seeing sellers, we saw a little bit of a deviation in this. See how here, it indicated if it followed the trend, it would have gone a little lower, but it didn't. But we'll see how much we recover in January. Now, total number of homes sold. What's interesting is, remember, you see how these are offset by a month? Remember that homes sold reflects offers that were made a month earlier, right? When a home pops up as sold, that means that home seller accepted an offer at least a month earlier. So it's actually activity that happened in our case, November. So this number for homes sold is homes that went into escrow in November or late October, right? Where do I expect this number to go? I expect it to continue downward and bottom out in January, and then start its increase in terms of homes sold. And see, check this out. So homes sold peaked May 24 is the highest, right? And we had a couple of peaks here in 2025, but nothing sort of booted out May of 2024. What's interesting about that is interest rates were so much higher then than in this following year. You would have thought it would have fed higher sales, but it did not. So at a time when we saw crazy inventory, crazy new listings, we saw feeble sales, even compared to the previous year, where active listings and new listings weren't as high as they are this year or in 2025. So this is concerning because it suggests an accumulation when we see a dramatic increase in the number of homes on the market or in inventory without a whole lot of sales that are peaking at all. It indicates it's not a question of choice. It's not a question of how many homes do I have to choose from. It's a question of willingness to take on whatever's required to purchase one of those homes, right? Things like interest rates or terms, those types of things. Next, let's look at pending. Look at what pending has done. We can see in 2023, pendings actually fell short of new listings. They exceeded new listings by a little bit in December of 2024. In December of 2025, pendings dropped below new listings. Another indicator that we're going to see not awesome sales numbers in the following month, right? Because pending is what I was mentioning before, where the thing that happens before a home gets sold is it goes pending contingent. This indicates we're going to see depressed levels of sales in January of 2026. So, likely see an increase in the accumulation of properties in some markets. Next, just checking to see if we've got any questions. Sorry, it's been a little while since I looked. Nope, nothing there. Feel free to ask any questions about any data that we're putting through here, or any other questions you might have relating to just our markets in general. All right, now what we're looking at here is Santa Clara County list price versus sales price. We can see it cross over each other here, right here in December of 2024. Look at that, just a direct crossover. In December of 2023, we see average sales price far below average list price, the original list price. This is original list price, by the way. Just another way of visually calibrating where things went for sellers in terms of expectations. But we can see here, original list price has now been shadowing sales price pretty much since September, October, where people have been getting more than expectations, right? Now, and to calibrate, given what we're seeing in terms of total inventory, and given what we're seeing in terms of homes that are selling, we're in a dynamic right now where the most desirable homes in their segment, right? And you could cut up into a lot of different segments. 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes at a certain price point, whatever. The best examples of those homes are selling quickly to the tune of, what was it? What was the days on market? 32 days, right? As the average. So we're in this marketplace where one thing you need to avoid, so let's give it context for buyers and sellers in this one. Given these numbers, what we need to see is sellers that are adapting quickly. If you get to the point where you're hitting that 30-day mark and you haven't sold, you need to adapt quickly because you're losing out. What's happening is homes that are the best example, right? Move-in ready, brand new appliances, brand new water heater, brand new heating and cooling, fresh roof, whatever. The dazzle, the houses with the highest level of dazzle are the ones that are selling and just going. And then other homes are sitting on the marketplace for extended periods of time. So you as a buyer need to understand any of these homes that fall into that not at the top of the heap category. And in most cases, those are homes where it's an aesthetic thing, right? Maybe it's a paint job. Maybe it's just a couple of things you can do that comparatively are less expensive to do, give you an opportunity as a buyer to potentially get a better deal. As a seller, you want that top dollar. There are things you need to do, and one of the best ways to understand what you need to do is to go visit homes similar to yours that are on the market. And try to be honest with yourself and think, yeah, this house simply looks better than mine. It could be it's just cleaner or it's freshly painted, whatever those dynamics are. Those are things you need to understand so that you get into that group of homes that are selling more quickly. Because if you look at the list of homes currently on the market in Santa Clara County, there are tons that have been on the market for hundreds of days. And that's a scenario you can save as a seller if you're willing to sort of embrace the realities of what's going on in the market. Okay, next. Let us talk about percent over or under asking price. Again, the trend is not that hard to spot. February, March, April, May, into June, right? Notice how April is kind of a magic month. April, not the most magic month in 2025. It tended to be February. But look at that. What does that tell you, right? If you're someone in the market, this tells you that willingness to pay above asking price compressed in 2025, pushed into February of 2025. And why? Because suddenly a whole bunch of homes came on the market in January, and the best homes sold quickly for over asking price. And then when that data came out in February, because January is when the offer would have been made and accepted, this number presented itself in February. Look at that huge jump from 103.5 to 107.5. And these are the county numbers. So, and I use these specifically because I want bigger sample sizes to increase our this tells you go on the market in late February, early March, so that you can close escrow in April and be part of this number. Here, same thing. Go on the market late December, early January, so that you can be part of this number, right? If you understand how these numbers work and what they're actually measuring, it doesn't tell you list your house in February, because if you list your house in February, what you're going to get is this, 106.6, assuming you've got everything lined up, right? You're a desirable home. You're a top representation of the type of home that looks like yours in that area, um, making you most desirable to buyers. But see, what we can see here is we did not get that big April boost. I mean, it's higher, but look at how overall we've just seen a steady decline in the amount over asking price that folks have been willing to pay. What does that tell us? It tells us that the feeding frenzy is slowing, right? It tells us that people are not as willing to pay as much over asking price. And remember, these are averages, so you're going to find plenty of neighborhoods where people are able to buy homes for below asking price or just over or at asking price. But this definitely shows you the trend, right? Whoa. There's no, was there any audio? God, have I been silent? I don't know. I have no idea. It looked like the light was off. In any event, man, I sure hope that's been on. Since I have a couple of viewers, I'm guessing it's been on. I'm assuming nobody's just been listening to me quietly with my lips moving and no sound coming out. But what this tells us is the trend is more and more drawing towards asking price and sellers not getting the huge bonuses above their asking price that we've seen in the past. All right, next. Maybe it's time for a new cable. All right, let's see. What we've got here is the total days on market. We can see now that we are at 32 days, right? That's where we're at. This is the peak. And notice that January of last year was sort of where that was, and January of the year before was sort of where that was. So this suggests that what we're going to see is us hitting the highest number of days on market this January. And I'm willing to bet that that's true. But let me explain why that's why that's not a thing to potentially worry about. When you see days on market jump like that, it's typically because so many more homes came on the market and a huge rush of purchases happened, selling off old inventory, right? We've already seen a compression of the market where buyers come out January, February. When you see this happening, and even in late December, and when you see this happen, it's not a suggestion that the market's gotten worse. It's a suggestion that suddenly homes that have been on the market longer are selling, which is why you see a boost in the total number of days on market, because more homes that have been on the market longer sold. And then you tend to see a precipitous drop, which is what we tend to see, right? Where from January to February, it drops because all of those sales happen, and then suddenly we fall back into the usual trend of days on market. Okay. Next, this is an indicator of how many homes have had a price reduction. So we can see that last month in Santa Clara County, we had 20% of homes had their price reduced. Only 13%, last month being November of 2025. In December of 2025, it was 13%. That's a 33% increase from a year earlier. So it's a bigger increase than a year earlier, but it's a lower increase than the month prior. So that tends to suggest that folks aren't having to reduce their prices month to month as much due to demand, right? In order to get sold, they haven't had to reduce their home prices as much. In San Jose, in November, it was 22%. In December, it was 14%, but it was 43% higher than the same time a year ago. In Morgan Hill, 14% in November, 18% in December, which is 117% higher than the same time a year earlier. Gilroy, 17% in November, 14% in December 2025, and that's a 33% increase from the same time last year. So all of that tends to indicate that in order to get sold, homes aren't having to reduce their prices as much when compared to November, but have had to do price reductions that exceed what we were seeing a year earlier in December of 2024. Given what we're seeing overall with numbers, this all kind of makes sense. I don't think it's anything that's horribly surprising. The Morgan Hill number surprises me a little bit, but when I looked into it a little bit more, it tends to be um, some folks have really had to drop their price. We had a couple of homes where they dropped their prices by a huge percentage, and I think that kind of skewed that. But I think if we were to correct that number, that number would be more in line with everything else being between 30 and 45% year over year change. Okay, so that's it for the numbers. If you've got any questions about what we covered, feel free to ask. Chat is up. I like to pause for a moment after we get through this part just to get an opportunity for us to answer any questions that anyone might have. I'm not seeing anything popping up, so we can jump on over to the other part of today's little experience. So here's some news items. Now, one thing that I talked about in the pre-show, which is the 15 minutes before the show starts, was some of my experience with AI and meeting agents that are using it and being solicited by companies that want me to use their AI service. So I'm just going to say this before we get into the news, since we're now in the body of the show rather than in the pre-show. You really need to have a face-to-face meeting with the agents you're evaluating to figure out if you want to work with them. Everything, all the interactions that you potentially have with an agent before you meet them physically could be interactions that they never participated in. It could all be AI. Videos you've seen of them could be AI generated. And I don't say that as a theoretical. I say it as an agent who's been doing this since 1988 and gets approached by everybody to buy their product to either get more clients or to streamline my process or whatever. That is exactly what's being sold right now. And I know of some agents, quote unquote, top agents in my local markets that are using this. And everyone who is a buyer or seller has now had the complications that they're going to experience grow geometrically. You cannot rely on any email, text, or video that you see. As I said in the intro, even this could be me being AI generated. Although most of the times I talk with these AI folks or these video generating folks, long form stuff tends to give it away at some point that it's not AI generated or that it is AI generated. So your job has been complicated immeasurably. You need to physically meet with them. Don't let it be a Zoom call. I get folks soliciting that have that it creates a fake video thing. I can be over here looking completely disheveled, and it can be me talking, but with an avatar that's being video projected into that looks like me. So just be super careful. That one big piece of advice I'm going to give to any buyer or seller before you hire an agent. You need to make sure and meet them. You need to get a feeling for who they are. Look them in the eye. Listen to your inner brain, your subconscious as to whether or not you should trust this person, and move on from there. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. This first article was best markets for first-time home buyers. The only reason I really pulled this one up is because, boy, did we get left out in the cold. Look at all those locations. New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Alabama, Arkansas, New York, Maryland, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. So the original reason why I would look at something like this is if you're someone who's looking to invest and you're looking for growth markets where you could potentially do well, I like to read articles like this and see what the math was that they used for this. Is it a great market for first-time home buyers because of local markets, diversification of industry, all these other various things? And in many of the cases, they're not. I mean, economic health is really a big one for me, but also diversification of a community. If it's really a one-horse town in terms of, which is, and I hate to say this, and people beat me up for it. I'm not a huge Vegas guy. Because it is so tied to very much a very singular appeal that and one of the first things people cut in their life is a trip like that to Vegas if things are tight. So that's one reason why I've never invested in Vegas. But anyway, all right. Next, weekly housing trends according to the folks at Realtor.com. I like to just scroll down to this one to kind of do a comparison. Median listing prices down 0.2%. For us, we're up. 1.5. New listings up 5.3. And for us, we're up 30%. Active listings up 23.2, and we are up 28. And for time on market, it's 5 days slower. And for us, time on market is not 5 days slower. It's about 2 days slower. So overall, compared to the rest of the world, compared to the rest of the United States, our market is sort of beating those numbers nationally, and we tend to do that. So, and one of the interesting things was, and we'll look at this in a minute. I've got some cool interactive data in terms of what to expect from home prices. There's an awful lot of chatter about California home prices going down a certain amount, and that's absolutely going to be true in some markets. But in our local markets, in most areas, it's going to be less true. December 2025 monthly housing market trends report. The takeaway: inventory rose for the 26th straight month nationally, up 12.1% year over year. Demand stayed soft. Demand was probably, for us, was a little better than the national numbers. Regional divides remain stark, with inventory recovery concentrated in the South and West, while price per square foot gains held firm in the supply-constrained Northeast and Midwest. Bench market versus outlier metros reveal how uneven housing conditions really are. And I think that's, whenever you see uneven, you should think opportunity, right? If you're seeing uneven, that typically means some places are going to be a better deal and some places are not. Some places are staying high priced, right? So that's an opportunity for you if you're somebody who doesn't need to live in a specific place to do your job. And boy, is that true here, right? So as somebody who has grown up in Silicon Valley, I went to Limbrook High School, I went to San Jose State University. I've worked in tech, I've worked for Apple. There are so many people who can do their job from anywhere, and they don't need to be here. And I'm finding an awful lot of those folks are looking into moving places that are a little bit more financially easy to digest. Places like Nevada, Texas, Florida, just because it's so much cheaper to live there. Next, mortgage rates. We're going to look at mortgage rates in a minute. Mortgage rates fall to the lowest level since September. This is from January 15th, so just 2 days ago. 6.06 for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. We're going to see what that number is right now. Let's go ahead and just look. So here it is. Let's pretend that you're looking to purchase a home. And, there's something else we can talk about here, too, because this has been on social media a lot over the last few weeks. If we're looking at Morgan Hill, and this will be the same whether you're looking at Morgan Hill, Gilroy, San Jose, Campbell, Mountain View, it doesn't matter. It all works off the same algorithm for this one. And we assume what's our average purchase price, average sales price is, well, we can put this up to 1.8. That's just a crazy number. Assuming we're putting down 20%. Here's what you got. So you can get one for 5.796, assuming you have excellent credit. 6.132 from Home Simply. Look at these fees. Remember when we were talking about just 2 months ago, we were talking about fees for loans like this, where the fees were $20,000. So, and I like looking at these and particularly doing it over time to get a feeling for how is the lending market shifting. So these fees have gone down dramatically. And the other thing is we're seeing more options. For those of you who've participated with me before in the Coffee and Real Estate live chat, you know that we have had instances where we've run these exact numbers and what we've seen is 1 or 2 lenders showing up here. And now we're seeing more. But take a look at what that monthly is, $8,403 a month. That's still nuts. And here is a thing. It's a speech I give all of my buyers. Not all of my buyers take it to heart because it requires a lot of financial discipline on your part personally. Do not buy the house that maxes out what you're approved for. In fact, don't even do that math. Do the what mortgage payment per month can you manage and then subtract $500 from it. You want to buy a house where that's what your mortgage payment's going to be. And then you want to take that $500 that you were comfortable allocating to your mortgage and apply it directly to principal every month. And you want to do this as early in the process as possible. So that very first payment you make, that very first mortgage payment, have a $500 check that you have designated as directly to principal. when you do the math on how much that makes you at the end of the loan, you'll be stunned. It's a huge, huge deal, because the other number that will stun you is if you just stick to the payment schedule, you'll be stunned at how little of what you're paying is going towards principal. You're paying all interest, right? So I think that's one of the biggest things to do now, and one reason to do it that way also is it's even if you're somebody who isn't going to stay there forever. Let's say you're not. You're saving more money by doing that than by not doing it, even if you know in 5, 6, 7, 8 years you're going to sell. So let me just suggest that you do that. For all my buyers out there, I think that's a very big move. And then when I look at numbers like this, where you're going to have to come up with between $8,400 and $8,800 or $8,900 a month for your rent, it's just mind-boggling. And I think it's one reason why I see an awful lot of folks not interested in buying. And there's tons of talk on the internet about how to solve that problem, but I don't see anyone actually doing much to solve it. So next, let's talk a little bit about before we do that, let me do the self-plug, the shameless plug for myself. Now, for those of you who've worked with me in the past or who know me, you know that every year I do a review of my technology that I use to service my clients or my potential clients. This is a service that I use called HomeBot. You just enter your address and click check, and it will spit out the estimated value of your property. No email address, no nothing. It just tells you. And for my money, it's the most accurate. And it continues to be. Again, every year, and I just finished doing this in December, I do a review and I look at other services and see how good they are. Why is this one better? If you use Zillow, Trulia, which uses the same algorithm, or Redfin, and this is a hard one to do, but since I'm always looking at properties, if you see a listing appear on Realtor.com and it has just appeared, go do a search on Trulia and Zillow and see what they say is the estimated value of that home before it gets posted to them. Let's say it's $1 million home. Its listing price is $1 million, but let's say that Trulia, Zillow, and Redfin all say that home is worth $750,000. Well, magically, as soon as that home lists and shows up on their websites, suddenly that amount of $750,000 is going to be very close to $1 million. It might even be more than $1 million. I see this happen all the time. In fact, it has happened every single home I've listed for the last 10 years. This has happened to. So what I wanted was a tool that ignores that. Because what they ask for it is not a value indicator. It is simply what they hope to get. It needs to be based just on comparable properties. That's what HomeBot does. If I were to ask what my house is worth, HomeBot would tell me. If I listed my home, HomeBot's number doesn't change. Zillow does, Trulia does, Redfin does, all of them do. So that's one reason why it's awesome. Right? You're gonna get the closest to a super honest opinion on what the value of your property is. Now, if you want to take it to the next level, if you're somebody who wants to, this is something I suggest all my homeowners do once a year. They assess the value of their home. They look for lending opportunities that might help them do better, all kinds of stuff. What this does every single month, you would do manually once a year if you follow my advice. So suddenly, this thing you got to sit down and pop out a calculator on your desktop and figure things out, you don't have to do, because this is going to tell you every month. Every month it gives you a home value estimator, home equity tool, home purchasing options, refinance calculator, your mortgage summary, important options, whether or not it makes sense to refinance your home, net worth of the home, and a home renting tool that'll tell you, if I rent it, how much will I make? If I do an Airbnb thing, if I've got an ADU in the backyard, this has got all the tools for you to do that stuff. And frankly, it goes above and beyond what I have always suggested folks do, at least on a yearly basis, in terms of analyzing their home. Your home is your single biggest investment. You should know all the angles. And if the tool that you use here under the options part or the mortgage summary part or refinance calculator part tells you it makes sense to refinance, then instead of these letters being red, they'll be green. Right? So right now, so it's a loss. It tells you it's a loss. But see, this is the part that also tells you if you pay X amount more each month toward principal, that's how much you save. That's just $250. And you save for almost $40,000. But anyway, if you decide this makes sense, you can click it and it'll take you right to a local lender right here in Morgan Hill who will give you real numbers so you can assess whether or not this was correct and you should go ahead and refinance. Not likely to tell you that given today's numbers, but it's a fantastic tool. And the cost of doing that is to give me your email address. However, I don't spam people. You're going to get a monthly newsletter, and that's about it. So I'm not going to beat you over the head. And if at any time you decide you don't like it, you can cancel it, and you can be removed from my list. So it's just a great tool. I use it for my home, and I suggest that everyone does. One other thing to mention is my podcast is coming back. It's been off for almost 2 years. This is the player, so you can see the last one was April of 2024. Took a break, but again, it was very highly rated by a lot of different folks. So it's coming back. You'll see a new episode next week, most likely Tuesday. But it's going to come back, and it's going to be every week at least. So I'm willing to commit to doing at least one show a week. So we'll be back in the saddle with that. All right, with that out of the way, with the all yay, I'm wonderful talk gone, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the Reventure app numbers. This is a great app, and when I'm trying to get big picture stuff going, I love looking at it. So we're pretty much right here, and this is the home price forecast where it projects really no change. 2025 value 1,583,000, 1,583,000 for 2026. That's what it is guessing overall for the county is going to happen. Given the numbers we covered today, I don't think that's necessarily wrong. I think it's absolutely within the realm of possibility that that's what we get. And of course, mentioned this before, huge varieties in the submarkets here. So there will be some areas that'll see big increases because they're just ridiculously popular. Let's see here. So days on market. This one is reporting 54 days. When I report the numbers, I'm only reporting on single-family residential townhomes and condos. So this may be integrating more of that because our days on market was 32 for the county. Home sales. Anybody have any questions? Any data they'd like to see? Now remember, this is a tool that is national, so I get access to national data. So it's a great tool for me when I'm helping clients who are considering moving to other locations. And I tell you, when I'm talking to people, it's this area. I just finished talking to someone who wants to move to Idaho, and then there's Texas and Florida that are Tennessee became a popular one for a while, but no one's really talked to me about Tennessee for a while. But boy, one up at Coeur d'Alene, another one down by Boise. So I've had a few folks who are interested in talking about Idaho. Let's see here. What else? Market trends. Inventory surplus deficit. So that's the overall deficit. We've got a 2.8% inventory deficit. They are anticipating stable home price forecast, 48 average, long-term growth score a little higher. So if you've got any questions that we could answer with these, happy to do that. But if not, we are at after 11 o'clock, so we've been going at it for an hour. This would be the last opportunity for this show for us to have any chats about anything that might interest you. So feel free to ask those. If not, I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. I know I've got tons of stuff on the to-do list this weekend, most of it real estate related. So if you have any questions, concerns, anything you'd like to chat with me about, feel free to reach out to me. You can find me at soldbyrobert.com, where I can just show you. Just go to home and then contact Robert, and that is a very easy way to get in touch with me. Feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to help you find any buying, selling, investing opportunities right here in Silicon Valley that I can help you with. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Hope you enjoy your favorite coffee the rest of the day, and